Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first book club discussion in 2024. I can't believe it's 2024.
I can't
Um,
believe it either. I
I
mean,
know it's
it's
crazy.
time has just flown. I mean, absolutely flown. But we are so excited to be here and to be having this
Yes,
discussion tonight. I know it's going to be a fun
yes.
night.
I am beyond thrilled. So tonight we will be discussing Rebecca Not Becky with not one, but two amazing authors that are joining us live tonight. We there's no need to keep everyone waiting. Brenda, do you want to go ahead and introduce our special guests?
I will be happy to because I had such a wonderful time with this book. I am going to introduce Catherine Wigginton Greene, one of our author duos. Catherine is a writer, educator, and filmmaker whose storytelling focuses on strengthening human connection and understanding. Her accomplishments extend to directing the groundbreaking feature documentary, I'm Not Racist, Am I? Wrote, produced, and co hosted the online video based interactive program Look Deeper Race, and developed a series of workshops on difficult dialogue called Was It Something I Said? She works in partnership with a network of individuals and organizations committed to equity and justice. She's brought her interactive talks to thousands of individuals at national conferences, K through 12 schools, colleges and universities, government agencies, and major corporations. She brings humor, humility, and curiosity to every room so that people leave feeling informed and inspired and more connected to one another. A graduate of Coe College and Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, Catherine is currently pursuing her doctorate from the George Washington University's Graduate School of Education and Human Development, focusing on emotion and difficult dialogue. Welcome, Catherine.
Yay.
Hey, and you're on mute, Catherine.
Hello, good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And I am so happy to introduce the second author of this brilliant novel. Christine Platt, also known as the Afro Minimalist, is a multi talented author and advocate who has carved a unique path in the world of literature and social change. With her captivating storytelling and passion for promoting minimalism, Christine has earned a reputation as a powerful voice in the literary and lifestyle communities. She writes literature for children. She has the Frankie and Friends series, and adults as well, The Truth About Awati and the Afro Minimalist Guide to Living with Less, that center on African diasporic experiences, past, present, and future. Her expertise and dedication to social change have led to collaborations with major publications and organizations, further amplifying her voice and impact. She pursued her passion for history by earning a bachelor's degree in Africana Studies from the University of South Florida, a master's degree in African and African American Studies from Ohio State University, and later a Juris Doctor degree from Stetson University College of Law. She currently serves as executive director for Baldwin for the Arts, a nonprofit founded by Jacqueline Woodson that supports historically underrepresented literary, visual, and performing artists. As a sought after speaker, Christine has delivered powerful talks and workshops at universities, conferences, and literary festivals, captivating audiences with her unique insights and inspiring messages. And I can attest to that because I have heard Christine speak in person and she has been an idol of mine. So, welcome, Christine. We're so
Oh,
excited to
thank
have you
you.
both with us.
Thank you for having us. And forgive my voice. I'm getting over laryngitis. So I know it sounds a little raspy and sexy, but this is not my not my
The
normal
sexy.
speaking voice.
Oh, well, you sound wonderful to us. We so
Oh, thank
appreciate
you.
both of you being on tonight to talk about this unbelievable book. I mean, really. Lisa and I were talking about it this weekend and you know discussing some of the points, and there were just so many. You know, it was just so multidimensional. I mean, it's interwoven with relationships and marriage and friendship and family and race and so many other topics, which we hope to get in detail on in a little bit. For those watching at 7:15, we will give a spoiler alert after 7:15. There will be spoilers on the plot, so if you haven't read the book, you tune us out after that and come back and watch the recording. And meanwhile, put your questions in the chat for these wonderful authors. So let's jump right in. For those who haven't read the book yet, Catherine and Christine, could one or both of you give us a quick summary of the book?
Go ahead, Catherine, you got it.
Okay, so Rebecca Not Becky begins about 3 years post a George Floyd-like event that has been fictionalized, but it's something that is in the background that very much feels familiar to the time that we're in now. We have these two main characters who find themselves at that moment in time. And I'll start with Rebecca, and then Christine can take over with that. With DeAndrea. So Rebecca was someone who was very activated by that event. She wanted to start doing better. She wanted to she was paying a lot of attention to what was going on in social media. There was a viral anti-racist syllabus, just as we had, and she was reading about books that she should be taking, that she should be reading from, that she should be reading to her children to raise better, white children who have a racial consciousness. And so she kind of jumped into that universe with a fervor and urgency that also will feel familiar to many of us, but without a lot of analysis and introspection. And so she did do things like start a parent diversity committee at her children's school. And she, is very much trying to do the right thing. But she realizes that there's not a lot of diversity in her community. And this bothers her. And she is kind of awakened again by her daughter calling that out in their lives. And she gets very excited when she finds out that the Whitmans, DeAndrea Whitman and her family, are moving to her town. And then I'll kick it over to Christine.
Yeah. So DeAndrea Whitman, wife, mother, reformed attorney, turn stay-at-home mother. She and her family are moving to Rolling Hills, much to her chagrin, I'll say that. She is not happy about this move, but it is but it is a necessary move. It is a move that is inspired by circumstance. And that circumstance is that her mother-in-law, Mama Whitman, was recently diagnosed with dementia. And the best memory care facility on the East Coast just happens to be in Rolling Hills, Virginia. And so DeAndrea has to pack up her family and leave the beautiful Black oasis of Buckhead, where she's built this beautiful village of friends who are more like family to her, and move to this whiter than white suburb of Rolling Hills. Again, to say she is not thrilled with the move, put it mildly. She is very concerned, and rightfully so, about being one of the all Black families, if not the only Black family in this community. She can't, allegedly there's another one out there, but she hasn't seen them since she first visited Rolling Hills. So she is, not particularly excited about meeting Rebecca, who is, of course, very excited to be meeting her and having the Whitmans at her daughter's school. And so their lives converge, and a lot of shenanigans and lessons learned ensue. I will say that much. I'll save the rest for the after spoilers. I don't want to give away any spoilers.
Right. Oh, that was great. Both characters are really just well written and well developed. So I can't wait to get into that a little bit later. But just to kind of kick things off tonight, I was wondering, we know you're friends in real life, and so how did you co-write this novel, and what inspired you to write it together? And I guess I'll start with Catherine.
Sure. So Christine and I, it's funny. I mean, we met doing anti-racist work years ago through the film that you had mentioned before, I'm Not Racist, Am I? And Christine's work at the Center for Anti-Racist Research and Policy. So we'd been in this universe together of doing a lot of work around racial consciousness, equity work. And after George Floyd's murder, we were in constant communication about a lot of things, and also as the pandemic. And Christine had been working with an agent for her own, the other books that you had mentioned, Truth About Awiti and her children's book series. And they approached me about maybe collaborating on something. And so that's kind of how that came about. Really, it was this idea of, what if we told a story about a woman named Rebecca who doesn't want to be a Becky? And so that really reflected what was going on at the time. Again, what I mentioned before, this urgency to do the crash course on anti-racism and to understand what was going on and where we were and where we've been. And so we decided we really wanted to try and add something different to the conversation at that moment. Maybe bring a little bit of levity, not because we weren't taking the issue seriously, because we found that a lot of people were taking themselves too seriously. And there were times where we were doing that. And when we do that, and when those of us who are maybe new to the topic or new to thinking about racism in a structural way, if we spend so much time in our head questioning every single word that we ever say, like Rebecca does, focusing on maybe things that aren't actually moving toward equity and justice, then we don't have a lot of space left to do the really hard work. And so we wanted to enter that conversation with something a little bit different, thinking maybe it doesn't have to be so hard all the time talking about race. And so Christine approached me about collaborating with her on this, and we decided we'd do the dual narrative. And that came also from our work in the field of doing this type of education, where you would show people the same exact thing or the same story would occur in the news, and you'd see wildly different interpretations and subjective experiences with it. And I'm deeply interested in that as well. Like, how can we all read the same article on a website and have completely different interpretations and takes on it? So we wanted to tell a story of two women's perspectives as their lives converge. And so just to see how in the very same town, they could be living in like parallel universes. And so we wrote the chapters back and forth. I wrote all of Rebecca's chapters. Christine wrote DeAndrea's chapters, and we would outline and write and come back together, and then go write again, come back together. And then at some point it all came together.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Christine, had you done that kind of collaboration before on a writing project?
No, no, this is actually for both of us, this is our first co-authored work. I mean, I think in film, Catherine had, in journalism, had probably more collaborative experiences than I have, working with a partner on bringing together, bringing a creative project to life. But as Catherine mentioned, we had an outline that we worked from, and that was really helpful. To just kind of serve as like a roadmap. I mean, oftentimes we would veer wildly from the outline, but for the most part, we stayed the course. It was more fleshing out some of the details and some of the more technical things. And this was a dual narrative where folks, it's rarely done this way, and I think that's one of the things that Catherine and I figured out early on, the why behind why co-authored books often have folks in different spaces and places, or an event has already happened and they're sort of like recapping, right? It is a little harder to really manage that narrative and manage our characters' emotions and feelings and what they're wearing and what they're doing. And so, yeah, that part of the journey was just keeping track of those little technical details was probably the most challenging. But I think, having a roadmap is what made it sort of possible and made it more fun for us. And as Catherine said, we would write our respective chapters, and then we would get together and read them aloud, and that was always a lot of fun. So yeah, it was rough, and then it wasn't, and then it was
And then
amazing.
it wasn't.
Yeah, and then it wasn't.
Well, I
It
hope we'll hear more
definitely was
about that.
amazing.
I hope we'll hear more about that later because
Yeah,
it
well,
just was
no, the
a
rough
fascinating.
part. Yeah, no, and I should say, the rough part was just like figuring out our rhythm, because obviously if all we had to do was just go write our respective chapters and that be it, we would have been done, right? But it's like, how do we write our respective chapters, be honest with our characters and their narratives and their respective stories? How do we make sure that we're getting the message across that we're trying to get across without being too teachy or preachy, right? I mean, like, those were the things. When I said it's hard, that's what makes it that's what made it hard, right? I mean, I think
Oh,
the easier part was the fact that I was doing that with a friend, and I really don't know how anyone could co-author a novel with someone who they are not friends with. That is, I am highly impressed by anyone that can do that, because I think having our friendship to center us through the hard times and while we were working through some of the more challenging aspects is what made it possible.
oh, that just makes it so special.
I
Well,
know, I love it.
we have a guest coming on to ask you a question. And so, a little surprise guest, but I'd like to introduce New York Times bestselling author Kristen Harmel and founding author of Friends in Fiction, a founding author. I can't talk tonight. Author of Friends, it's my Southern accent. Kristen Harmel. We want to welcome her tonight. She
Hi.
joining us to ask a very special
Kristen,
question.
Ladies, oh my goodness, I'm so enjoying this chat so far. This is so wonderful. Thank you
What a
so much for being with the book
surprise.
club. It's good to see you both. All right, so here is my question for you. So, National Book Award winning author Jacqueline Woodson said of Rebecca Not Becky, "This is a reminder that talking about race doesn't have to be hard. It simply requires us to be honest." So, I love that. It is such a wonderful thought. And it makes me wonder this. Before the book got to readers' hands with that very important message, were there things that you two were forced to be more honest about with yourselves or with each other as you worked together on the book? So, in other words, were there ways in which the requirement of being honest in your writing and honest with this story changed you?
Absolutely. Catherine, do you want to go, or you want me to? Okay, I'll go in, just since I was
You have been
just speaking.
nominated.
I know, right? First of all, so wonderful to see you, Kristen. This
You
is such a
too.
surprise. Thank you so much for joining us. I think the book challenged us in a lot of ways, with our own personal, not even just with our writing, but also just we all have inherent biases and prejudices, and right. And, it doesn't matter if you are a practitioner of the work, right? Like, we're all human. They're all lived experiences and things that we've had that, have left a mark on us. And I think one of the most challenging aspects for me was the ending. And you all got there were a couple different endings, than the one that is in the book. But all of them were
Hmm.
challenging for me to write. And I remember going to Catherine and just feeling very emotional. Because, there's a moment where your co-author is like, okay, where's the chapter? Where's the chapter? Waiting on your chapter. And I just had to have the conversation with her. And I was just like, Catherine, I am just in a space emotionally, right? I know what I have to write. I know what I want to write. I know what I need to write in order for us to move this story along and say the things that need to be said and really get the message across. But this is like hitting me in a very emotional place. And I actually cried and said, I don't want to write it. And I remember, she may not remember this, but it was very sweet, because Catherine, she was like, well, do you want me to like take a crack at it? Like, do you want me to like, try and take a crack at it? And it was, it was tough, right? Like even talking about it, is tough because it did take me to a place and I was like, I just don't want to have to go there emotionally, because when you're writing about these characters, when you're writing about these experiences, as you have to almost live it on the page as you're writing it. So yeah, that was challenging. That was challenging for me.
I can imagine. How about you, Catherine?
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, things that um Christine's example just now was also just a part of a consistent reminder of doing this project together, that you know these experiences, yeah, we were having fun when we were reading together, and we are poking fun at a lot of places that this conversation can go, especially when people start to get into the performance of being allies, and the ways that we have started to, we get in this space where we're trying to wordsmith our way out of racism, and we're trying to satirize that. But as we're after 7:15, so I can say this, the book takes a turn toward very serious and dark issues. And um and and having that conversation with Christine and knowing like, okay, this doesn't go away ever. And when we were kind of processing that and the ending and talking about it, kind of where we landed was like, write that, like write that kind of nuance, and this like, I don't know how to make my way out of this, because that was so real to me, and to have such a like close intimate relationship with somebody, as part of what is actually really powerful about, I think, interracial friendships, is that we can see just how this is real. This is not just something in the news. This is affecting somebody that I care about, and wanting to like just recognize the humanity, it like inherent in every single one of these interactions. The piece that I also learned about myself was in a very early draft, and really the way we started out this book was like, the original idea was like, oh, how about a Becky who doesn't want to be a Becky, which is sort of funny. um, and I think not I think, I know what happened in early drafts, especially of Rebecca's character, was that she was a complete caricature of all that we think is wrong with problematic white women, just like I mean, just out of left field. Everything that she was saying and doing was like a composite of every single thing that we know of stereotypes about what white women say, including myself over the years. And what I realized is that, and a mentor of mine actually pointed this out, that there was such judgment seething through the page of Rebecca. And I realized that I had to grapple with my own self-loathing about where I have been in this work. And that I was working through a lot of things that I had done in the past or thought in the past or had been in proximity to, that like I was ashamed of. And so as we got through more and more versions, I mean, Rebecca is still very imperfect, and she has a journey and an arc, but not major, and just being able to make it real, that this is a real person, and to be less judgmental of her,
Yeah.
even when she's messing up. Big
We
time.
had some fun. We had some fun though too. Like I don't want you to think it was all like what we learned was so heavy and but I mean that aspect of it, I know it was surprising for me, right? That I just couldn't believe that I had like gone through all of everything, and we'd have really hard conversations because some of the things that we were talking about were really hard, and then it get to the end and just be like, I just felt like a big whiny baby, like, oh my God, I can't believe I can't do it. And it was talking to Catherine as my friend, not as my co-author, that allowed me to really work through that. Some of the other sort of things that we learned about ourselves is not to trust Google. um,
Yes.
we were very, well, I'll say I found myself relying on Google and, saying like, I would Google things that rich white ladies like or whatever, right? And like, I would find stuff. And so one day I'm reading this chapter and I'm, reading it aloud and I'm thinking I'm having a good old time. And I have Rebecca pulling out these Yeti mugs. And Catherine is like, she would not be using this camping mug in her kitchen. Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, but I Googled mugs that rich white ladies like. Like, what are you talking about?
Now it's
I
a
was like,
Stanley.
Oh, that's
no, Stanley
funny.
wasn't out yet. But yeah, every now and then we would have like little fun moments like that, just stereotypes. And, we've had some good times for sure.
Wow, what a great answer. Well, thank you too. And Lisa and Brenda, thank you for letting me pop in. That was really kind of you to let me crash your party.
Thanks, Kristen.
Oh, we
Thank you
loved
for
it. Thank you
joining
so
us,
much,
Thanks for
Kristen.
Kristen.
joining us.
All right, I'm gonna
Bye.
go watch the rest of this wonderful chat. Congratulations on such a great book, you two ladies.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, thanks, Kristen.
Bye.
Have a
Bye,
great night.
Kristen.
You too.
I have a comment from the chat that I'd like to read, and it kind of goes into one of our advanced questions as well. Leah says that Alzheimer's played a part in this story, and with her mother having had it, she wanted to share that she feels that you guys handled the topic wonderfully. And so the question is, because you kind of shined a light on people suffering with dementia and also their caregivers, Memory Village seemed like an excellent place, like it was the best place for care. What was the research like doing that? And are there places like Memory Village, like real places like that? If not,
Okay, first.
can we get them?
No, no, no. I'm so glad that you asked that question. I want to answer the Memory Village question. And then I'd love for Catherine to share whatever she feels open enough sharing about the dementia sort of aspect of the story. Because, I do think, again, that's it's a topic where you can't necessarily, you can go on Google and get research, but there were definitely moments in the story where I was taking it too seriously. I have not had any family members suffer from dementia, but several years ago, I had read an article about this magical facility in the Netherlands called Hedgewick. And it is a little town that is, well, it's a replica of a town. And essentially, though, everyone there is medical staff that are plain clothes, and it is for people who are suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's. And it just always struck me. I just thought, wow, what? And I mean, like, it made me super emotional, and I just always remembered it. And so when Catherine and I sat down to really flush out, like, what are some of the themes of the book? What are some of the things that we want to talk about? Because we are dealing with women who are at an age in their life where they have young children, you know, they have aging parents. It would be so unrealistic and so unfair for us to not really incorporate that into the totality of these characters' lives. And so I was like, Catherine, I got to tell you about place I read about years ago called Memory Village. There's a whole chapter that got scrapped because I like really went too hard on trying to describe Memory Village, but I was just so fascinated. But anyway, and so I had shared that with her, and I love that she embraced it and was really able to help me sort of think through what it really feels like to care for someone with dementia.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many people have, friends of mine who've finished the book, many of whom have a parent or had a parent with Alzheimer's who have said, like, one that hit really deep, it was hard to read some of it. And do we have any places like Memory Village in the US? I mean, hopefully this will happen. It has to be in the future because this place is incredible. And so on a personal note, the in the book, I dedicate the book to my grandmother, Nanny. My oldest daughter is named after her. And I mentioned three things about her that were really, really, I think, foundational in making me who I am, actually, which is that she always had a jar full of cookies in her house. So she was very welcoming and generous, hospitable. And she always went and stood at the door when she heard an ambulance go by, and she'd say a prayer for the person who needed that ambulance, recognizing humanity in every single person. And third, we would watch Wheel of Fortune together, and nothing made her happier than when everybody won a little bit of money. So this idea of everybody getting something and it being fair and feeling, equal. And she had Alzheimer's, and those things never left her. But there was that combination of like pain, but also just beauty in her up to the very end. And I tried to bring that forth in with Nana Myland in the story, where she, is a little bit paranoid. She thinks people are stealing from her. My grandmother certainly had that, but she also just gets, experiences a lot of joy being with her family, even when she doesn't really know who they are necessarily, knowing their names. She likes their soft skin. That's a direct quote from my grandmother. And so that was really important to me, because there was always this pain and this humor, because there's funny things that happen. And there's still so much essence of our loved ones, even when they're going through that still remain. So I really wanted that to be part of the story as well. And I would say 90% of my close friends are dealing with this right now. So like Christine said, there's no way we couldn't have that as part of these women's lives. That it's just so real across race.
Yeah. Yeah. And Catherine was really influential in helping me develop Mama Whitman as a character, because, I wanted to show, and, it's so funny. We were one of the conversations we had recently, actually was a tattered cover. There was a guest there who sort of like pulled me aside, and we were just like chit-chatting. And, one of the things that I feel happens within stories is that it's like a hotel review, right? It's like, we never really talk about the wonderful. We never leave like the 5-star review. It's like, oh, if we have we have a horrible experience, we're running to leave a 1-star review. And I felt sometimes a lot of the information that I was getting was those 1-star sort of experiences, right? And so because I had not had a family member that had, suffered from Alzheimer's or dementia, Mama Whitman initially as a character was just very, very heavy, because everything that I was getting was from what was online, right? And it was just like the worst of these worst situations. And trusting Catherine as my co-author to help me develop the character and give Mama Whitman some humor and some joy, and help weave in those little memories about who she was really powerful, and a lesson learned for me too.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love to hear about your collaboration. Well, I think it's a quick question, but we talked a little bit about, y'all talked about the summary earlier, and about Rebecca and her desires to welcome DeAndrea immediately, and but being kind of clueless. She always tended to make things about her, right? And 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 even almost to the end, and DeAndrea, to her side, was judging Rebecca even before she knew what her name was. She was calling her a Becky. So at the end, though, she called her Rebecca. And that made me wonder, the treatment of that whole thing in the book made me wonder, was the title of the book originally Rebecca, Not Becky? Or was it ever something else?
Well, it was always Rebecca, Not Becky, for me and Catherine. I'm pretty sure editors and other people had ideas, but that was the one thing we were pretty firm on. I love that you caught, though, that at the end, that was very intentional. The amount of time that I went through to make sure she did not call her Rebecca before we got to the end of the story, right? I mean, it was
We noticed.
Yeah.
It was very
love that.
intentional. Thank you for her to finally see her as Rebecca, someone who is not just a Becky, who is someone that is not just this other white woman, like another white woman in Rolling Hills. And so I love that you caught that.
Oh, thanks. Well, on that note too, I know where time is flying by, but on that note too, I love the cultural references in this novel. And Lisa and I compared notes over the weekend to see which ones we knew and which ones we didn't. And so book club members, those of you who are watching, I'm taking a poll. Did you know what
Yeah.
the hawk is out meant in the book? We'll give them a few
Lisa, you
minutes to
knew.
answer.
I
Lisa,
knew.
okay.
I
Yeah,
did
I knew.
not.
Well, not only that, let us know if
Oh, go
you
ahead.
knew what a Becky was and if you knew what a Karen was, because I feel like everybody knows that. But Brenda didn't know what a Becky was, but she knew what a Karen was. So
And
let us know what you knew.
another footnote, I asked Lisa, did she think everybody would know what a redneck was? And so I'm curious, did y'all know what a redneck was? Because,
Um,
I did from, little,
yeah,
but
but I grew up in the South, so that was
Yeah.
I knew what a redneck was for sure. And I think we were also mindful about some of the terms that we use, some that are, can be pretty derogatory. I think depending on where you grew up, they may not be as hurtful and harmful, right? But definitely we wanted to be mindful of some of those references. And actually, at probably most of the book talks, we asked white folks if they knew if what the hawk was out meant. All the Black people know what that means.
So funny when I was reading, because I also live in Atlanta, so I could relate to DeAndrea a lot. Like when you were talking about the places in Buckhead, and I was like, oh, this is so on point. This is where I live. But when I got to the part where the hawk is out, I just cracked up because I was like, oh, I wonder who's gonna know what that means. And it's just so funny because there are different things and sayings. And I do want to mention one thing that you guys might not know. Um, Unintentionally, you might have given us a little shout out in the book because towards the end, when you said Rebecca showed up and showed out for DeAndrea at the end, we show up and show out is our book club tagline. So we were super excited when we saw
and
that.
We did that on purpose.
I'm trying to remember, was it Colleen Oakley who gave us that? Yeah, it was
Colleen
Colleen
Oakley
Oakley
said
who
that
gave us
about
that
us.
tagline because she was like, "You guys show up and show out when we have events."
Yeah. Our book club members are loyal and they come to events. We show up and show out. So
Love it.
we also loved that was in the book. A couple of members mentioned that. They were like, that's so cool.
That
I
is,
do have
we
a
did that on
couple.
purpose.
Yay. You knew subconsciously that you would be here tonight.
Yes, they just flowed onto the page.
So I do have a couple of comments. Edie says she knew Becky, and she knew what a Becky and a Karen was. Debbie knew both Becky and Karen, but she had to look up the hawk. Linda didn't know the hawk.
Thanks for
Diane
looking it
didn't
up,
know
though.
Becky or the hawk. Everyone knew what a redneck was so far. It seems like everyone knew what a Karen was, but they didn't know a Becky. I'm trying to see if anyone knew the hawk. Oh, coming from Chicago. Oh, it's my mom. Yes, my mom knows. She said coming from Chicago. I know what the hawk is. Um,
Hilarious.
Yeah, I will
yeah,
say this too. Catherine and I were so grateful for the publisher to really trust us with, the telling of these character stories and, those little subtleties and in language and the nuances and things that are just very unique to our respective communities, them like giving us just trusting us completely because of the work that we've done in the past to just really be fully transparent and open with these characters and not too explanatory, which normally happens with diverse fiction. And so I love that folks had to look up the hawk is out, and now
yeah.
you know.
Now you know. And one of our members just said the hawk is out right now in South Carolina.
You're in DC
That's
too.
what Anissa said. She heads up our reading challenge. It's a great moderator and member of the book club. So yeah, we're all freezing down here right now in the South, and we're not used to it.
Okay, and I'm going
Uh,
to pull a completely random fact out while Lisa gets geared up for her question. I read today that in the Outer Banks, where the alligators are, that the alligators are freezing and that they have learned to stick their snouts out of the water just before the water freezes and they can breathe, but they're just stuck there until it. Okay, that's your
Whoa.
mindless fact for tonight. Thank you very much.
And I'm
I
going to
love
probably
it.
do a deep dive on that
I
after we get
know,
off.
right? I was like, we're totally Googling that after.
that's crazy.
I
Oh,
need to see a photo.
Okay, so I want to circle back to, um, we one of the things was being learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And one of the parts for me in the book where my stomach was in knots was when Malik took off to go to the bathroom. It was before we saw the marching men. Just knowing that he was going alone somewhere else away, I was like, oh God, what's gonna happen? I was like, oh no, no. Like I was just on the edge of my seat. Um, and following that, we all know that he was handcuffed and Jack wrongly accused him, so, that whole entire scene. But my question is, how hard was it to write that, knowing how Black men are being targeted in the country today? And there's so many things that happen like that we see on a daily basis. In that scene, it was so real, but how did you know when to stop the scene? How did you decide that was the part where we see Rebecca stand up and really use her voice? Um, how did that work? Was that a collaborative thing in that moment? How did that work with you guys?
Catherine, I'll let you jump jump in. I think, oh yeah, that was a very pivotal moment in the book, and I think we grappled back and forth with what the inciting scene was going to be, and then, as you know, Catherine wrote that first sort of chapter and look at what when that went down. And so, yeah, I'd love her to share what was in her head at the time and what I know was in her head at the time and how important it was, for us to have this scene in the book.
So when we went through so many different iterations of what was going to happen at the end of the book, we knew there would be something, because there always is, you know. Even, we got this question a few nights ago, I think in Chapel Hill, from someone saying, like, asking us about this turn from what was kind of lighthearted and felt like satirical to this very realistic event. Um, and, you know, that's what happens, right? That's what this is. And the moment you start to relax and you think that things are okay, or you forget where we are, and the surroundings around us. I mean, in this book, this felt, I mean, we wanted it to be a moment where, you know, oh, the statue's coming down. Like in the end, there was this fight, but it's like easy and let's have a celebration, you know? And the moment you let your guard down is when something like this can happen. Because it always does. And so we knew that that was going to happen. And um, and we also knew that we didn't want to have anything too horribly violent happen. That was all, we always were very clear from the beginning on that in the book, because we have enough of that in the world.
Yeah.
Um, but that is always in the backdrop of any incident. So even though it basically worked out okay, right? Malik didn't get brought in, no one got seriously hurt or killed, except that is the tape that is playing in the background of all of our consciousness, particularly
Right.
DeAndrea, seeing that happen. And so that's what we wanted to work with, that's the backdrop we were always operating in. And we also didn't want to show anything yet again where someone is brutalized, and And so then, I don't know that we said from the get-go that at the end Rebecca is going to have an awakening and do the right thing. We never really said that intentionally, but that's sort of what happened. It's like, it's hard to describe, but the characters just started doing this thing on their own as we were writing, and it just felt that's where the story was going. And yeah, I have a background in journalism, and so I usually, I'm reporting on the story, like reporting on the truth of what happened. And in some ways, it kind of felt like that's what was happening with this story, that these women and these people in Rolling Hills were living their lives, and we were there to report on it and tell that story the best we could, with as much like proximity and intimacy and truth as we could bring about.
Yeah. And I think
Oh, I love that.
the collaborative part too was so much of us saying, I think more so what we didn't want to happen. But so like once we agreed, like, okay, he will not be murdered, right? I mean, I think we went back and forth between like the handcuffs and the zip ties, and um, and one of the things that I thought was really powerful is that chapter is coming from Rebecca's perspective, right? Because we were very intentional about, not having DeAndrea have to retell or live all of these aspects of harm that happen. And so what you get to see instead is when DeAndrea is in therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
DeAndrea and Malik are in therapy, and you're hearing
Oh,
about how this has affected them. You get to hear her sort of have a recap, right? Where she is talking about how, man, she hasn't been able to sleep. When she does sleep, these are the things that haunt her, right? And so I think like those were moments that were very intentional, and I think I'm even more grateful for them now.
And I'll add too that one of the things that I thought was so important about DeAndrea's chapter taking over there to see that is that when these incidents happen in the news, the videos go viral, maybe someone who was involved in recording it or who was part of it has their 15 minutes. We only, and then I'll also add too that sometimes the people who are the victims or the family members of victims are then thrust into this spotlight where they have to become activists and the voice of a movement. And what we see instead in this, and what I think Christine did so brilliantly, was like, what is it like in those quiet moments after these events happen that becomes
Mm-hmm.
so public? What's the healing process like? What's that wrangling like? We don't have to see DeAndrea out there giving speeches to the world about this. That doesn't have to be her role. Instead, we see what happens in the intimacy of their marriage and how they even figure out, what do we do next after this? Do we go back to this place? Do we want to be part of this
Mm-hmm.
community? How do we do this?
I think that was so powerful showing the aftermath in that way because
mhm.
a lot of times when people don't experience things like this themselves, they don't know. They're like, "Oh, well, someone might say, "Oh, well, it all worked out well and, he didn't go to jail." And like that's just the end of it. Like, "Oh, whoopsie, we made a mistake." And it's like, "No, this is going to affect them and their family for years to come, the rest of their life. This is not something that is easily forgotten. It's something that people shouldn't have to deal with. They shouldn't have to lose sleep over. And it's a part of their daily life. So I think that was so powerful that you guys um, showed that and showed the aftermath in that way. It was just fantastic. The whole book was fantastic.
Thank you.
It was absolutely brilliant. And just Lisa was saying earlier how that powerful scene with Malik made her feel just from her gut right at the beginning. I was also worried in the plot when Todd showed up, because I don't know, book club members, you let us know. Did any of y'all suspect that Todd was also involved and have that sinking feeling in your stomach? Because I did too. And fortunately, that didn't happen, or at least not that we know of in this book.
Uh-huh.
Which we'll ask you about in a moment. um, but I was just like, yeah, Becky, you go. Sound off at the police.
I was
I thought
proud
it
of
was
Becky.
beautiful too. Yes, ma'am, because
Rebecca, I should say Rebecca for sounding off.
Rebecca,
Rebecca.
Finally.
Rebecca showed up. Rebecca showed up at that event. And I think it was a beautiful showing of how someone, can use their privilege. I have seen many white women say things to police and act ways to police that I mean, like it is mind boggling and just unbelievable that the lack of fear.
Yeah.
And, in that moment, that was one of the tools that she had and she used it, for good. And I think it's important for folks to show, for folks to see what that looks like. And so yeah, I was really proud of Rebecca. I was proud of Rebecca in that moment.
Well,
Meant a lot.
it
I
was
was too.
fabulous, and I have to say too, Rebecca, that's when that was what was neat about it. It became personal for her that day because she was doing all this
Mhm.
stuff just because it was the right thing to do. But that day, it was her friend, and it was her husband, and she wasn't. I mean, I don't know if it occurred to her before then that that could happen to someone she knew, and so that just
Yeah.
made it all the more powerful.
Yeah. I want to point out too that, for all that Rebecca's in her head through most of the novel, second guessing every single thing she says, wondering if it offended DeAndre or somebody else, and just spinning out all the time. In this moment, she didn't think. She went right to like, what is happening? And I love that you brought that point, because here it was someone affecting her personally, that she just went straight to it. And she's shocked that her brother-in-law could actually be involved in something at that level, because she had been distancing herself. And here's Rebecca, who's trying to do all this stuff out in the world, thinking that she's just, getting everything
Mm-hmm.
right, trying to bring racial diversity into her comfortable life. um, and she's missed this person right out under her nose this whole time, not focusing on herself or what is going on in her own family, and instead trying to do the most outwardly. And I think there's a lesson in there for us, in terms of how to handle this. And what would it mean for then Rebecca to move on from this point to where she doesn't need to know the person who's affected so well? It's not a friend. It's not someone she's been obsessed with for months. That she actually would step up and intervene and speak up for somebody, regardless of whether she knows them.
Yeah. I was, it was so good. There's so many things. The time is flying by. I'm like, oh my gosh, we could
I
talk
know we only have
forever.
8 minutes left.
One thing that I do want to ask is, you know, towards the end, we have a couple of things. We know that DeAndre is pregnant, and she's got the Whitman charity come like that project. So there's a couple of things that we could know more about. That being said, have you guys thought about writing a sequel?
I mean, we knew that question was coming. Um, I
Everyone
think what
wants
we're,
it.
I know, I think what we're really hoping for is that we'll be able to tell some of these stories through television, and or through some other mediums, because it is a lot to try and put into, a novel. Like this could be 300 more pages, right? Like if we get into some of these backstories. And so would just like to ask that there be a collective prayer for me and Catherine to have a television show, a Rebecca Not Becky
Yes,
television show.
Well,
if
we
you
can also start the
do.
hashtag tonight.
I would
Yes.
like, yes,
Speak
Rebecca
for
Rebecca,
Not
all
not
the
Becky,
Becky.
Spencer's.
movie now.
Yeah. I want us to know more about Haritha and Jenny Q and the men,
Yes.
and I think there's such a amazing cast of characters that are in there. DeAndre's friends, Simone and Tony. I mean, they're
Oh,
hilarious.
I loved
Ruby
them.
Reed. I mean,
And and
LL needs his own Instagram account.
LL.
LO needs a whole
Yeah.
episode. He
Yes.
needs his own
LL needs
episode.
a
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. And and so in before that all happens, when that happens, but before that happens, I think what I also love about the fact that we get to talk to you about this with the book club, because you've read it. I mean, this has been very like liberating being able to talk about the ending of the book. Thank you for the opportunity, because we've just been holding it so tight and talking about the sort of like 6 chapters so much. But this has been really fun. But in thinking through what might happen next for DeAndrea and Rebecca and the people of Rolling Hills, I just love hearing from other people who have read it, like what they think was going to happen, or what they think DeAndrea and Malik should do, or where Rebecca goes from here. Or did Rebecca even really learn that much? And why did the white woman have to save the day again? And like all those conversations and that wrangling with it of like what might have happened next. And we intentionally left a lot of that open because we just wanted like we wanted to leave some nuance there about all the different ways this could go, and hear from readers about where they wanted it to go, or where they would have had it gone, because that like individual, like just subjective take on it is so fascinating and like illuminating for each of us, I think. So anyone wants to tell us what they wanted to happen, we like to hear all that too.
Well, our members are happy to share their their opinions. They've already started 3 hashtags: Rebecca Not Becky TV, Rebecca Not Becky movie, and Rebecca Not Becky TV series.
Yes.
We'll take any of it.
We show up and show out.
We love it. Lisa, I'm curious, like, did you want Malik and DeAndrea? And, of course they have, she set up the Whitman Way, she's pregnant, but, there's something about knowing, like, girl, you could go right up the street to DC and be in another little Black oasis. Like, don't you want to move? I feel like a lot of Black readers were really rooting for them to get the hell out of Rolling Hills. Right?
Honestly, when they went back to Atlanta, I thought, just stay. Y'all just stay. You tried, you gave it the old effort, but then I was like, no, they have their commitments, and, that's tough because
it's tough.
I can relate to so many things. Like, I've been the only person of color in a room, in a school, in a class, the only, and I was like Nina when I was younger, so I could relate to some of the fears that DeAndrea had as a parent for the sleepover, even though I don't have children. I could still relate because I remember some things that I went through when I was younger, and things that people said to me that I didn't even know. When you're young, you don't know, but then when you learn, it's just something. People want to keep their kids from racism. They want to um, shelter their kids from the ugliness of the world. But unfortunately, a lot of children, people of color specifically, don't have that choice. It happens and it has to be addressed. And that's kind of how it was for me. So I totally could relate to DeAndrea in that way. I kind of wanted them to stay in Atlanta, but I wanted Rolling Hills to be better because Rebecca was so, they have the diversity board. I thought that was great. I was like, come on, guys. But yeah, I don't know. We'll
What about
see.
you, Brenda? What did you think?
Well, and interestingly, I was rooting for Rebecca to become part of DeAndrea's team on the nonprofit,
Oh,
as her colleague, because she also
Be
was
good.
passionate about the Alzheimer's cause. So I thought maybe that was going to happen, that finally they would find their common ground.
well, I'm gonna go ahead and put that into one of the TV episodes.
That's right.
We could work that in.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll say
Wow,
something.
keep those hashtags going.
I think that something that also changed for us as we were writing is that initially we thought, oh, they're like, this will be a book about the friendship between Rebecca and DeAndrea, meaning we would see their friendship play out, as a friend, like a solid friendship earlier on. And then once we really got into the whole story, that's not what happened because it didn't feel realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do think that I see by the end of the book is perhaps a foundation that could get to a place that's solid enough for them to have a real friendship. Not this fast friendship, that
Yeah.
Becca was hoping for, not one that was fulfilling her needs of having diversity in her life, not that, but one that was built on a lot of other commonalities they had. I mean, they didn't even ever realize a lot of things about each other they had in common, that we know were there as readers who are reading both of their chapters. But that's where I think we would go from there too, is like, oh, maybe there's a possibility of real friendship here by the end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I did definitely root for that too. I wanted them to be real friends. I think that
I
they
feel
had a
like it
good
was
relationship.
coming. It was
Yeah.
coming. And then when the baby comes, I mean, Rebecca's
Yeah.
going to be over there snuggling with the baby. So, no, and I love, Catherine and I, there were iterations of the story where we were, they did become friends. And like she said, it just didn't feel, or they became fast friends, and it didn't feel really authentic. And I think we worked really well together on the ending to allow space for the readers to think through what was possible, and to also think through, like, well, how would I act in this situation, or what would I choose in this situation, right? Like, of course there's a bit of cognitive dissonance for a reason, which is why we chose to tell this story through fiction. But at the same time, we do want readers to see themselves, right, and to think through how they may have responded or acted in any of the given situations in the book. That is also part of the work, right? Is having an opportunity to think through, what would I do? What have I done, and what would I do differently?
Yes.
Well,
Okay, so it's eight
I
o'clock.
know.
I
It
know
went
we're
by
already
way too
over.
fast, like way, way too fast. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but our members will kill us if we don't at least ask, where can they buy a signed copy of Rebecca Not Becky?
Well, if you're in DC, we're probably going to have to go around to some bookstores and do some more signings. I would say look at our where we've been on tour, but folks have been buying them up. I think there are a few autographed covers left at Tattered Cover, and also Powell's. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, Catherine. You think of any others?
I think most it was, I mean, not to like brag, but but they did run out of books at most of our events, because what would happen, and this is perfect for the book club, is that after the conversation, people would have already bought one book, before the talk started, and then they went and bought like 5 or 6 more to give to their friends and family members or their book clubs. And so, because we really make the point that this book should be read in community. You want to read it and have your
Yeah.
experience with it, but you got to talk about it, make meaning of it with people in your community. Um, and so yeah, Tattered Cover, Powell's. I don't know if Flyleaf, they didn't have any. Yeah, so if you're in Portland or Denver,
Yeah.
but you can order from online at those two stores as well,
Yes.
right? So
Yes. And
yeah.
that's why I was saying, check DC. We both just got back from Denver. So it probably won't be like tomorrow or anything, but by the end of the week, we will make sure to find stock locally. We always try to support our local indie bookstores. We have so many wonderful ones here in DC. And so always check with them to see if you can order from their websites. All of them ship. And, hopefully you can get one of our autographed covers. I mean, covers, one of our autographed books. And I don't know, Catherine, maybe we could do like a giveaway or something
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
all too.
Yeah.
We would love that.
That would be awesome. Oh, we have tons more questions, but yeah,
I
I know we're
know.
past time already. Lisa, did you have anything else?
We would like to know what you're working on now, or where we
That's
can keep up with you guys online, so that everyone can just stalk you from this point forward.
not stalk, promote.
Yes,
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 promote,
exactly.
promote. Um, I am working on sleep. I am so tired.
Oh,
Um, yeah, no like real new projects on the horizon. Everything is stuff that's already under contract. Frankie Book 4, and the second book in the Afro Minimalist series, which is called Less is Liberation. And of course, always throwing around co-author ideas with
And tell them where they can find you online.
Oh, yes. You can find me on Instagram at I am Christine Platt. And my website, same name. I'm on Facebook. Just search my name and I'll come right up, Christine Platt. And yeah, and that's where I'm at.
And you can find me at I am Catherine Wigginton on Instagram. And then my website is catherinewiggintongreen.com. And I'm working on a nonfiction book that's sort of a memoir. It's called The Irish Goodbye, a memoir for those who've been left behind. And I take sort of the joke of the Irish Goodbye, where we, leave parties without telling people that we're leaving. And I'm using it to the story of my father's unannounced departure from our family, and using that as a vehicle to explore our family's Irish American and Catholic heritage, and what my search for answers about why he left and finding him reveal about myself and our family in the process. So I'm working on that. And yeah, and then any other things that Christine and I like to, we have millions of ideas.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Those are never ending. So we'll see what comes to fruition.
Well, you two are a dynamic duo, and we are honored that you took the time to speak with us tonight. So thank you so much for writing this wonderful book that caused so many great conversations that need to be had. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
having us. Thank you for having us. It's so fun.
Yes, thanks so much. It was just such a pleasure talking through these issues in the book with you tonight. Thanks so much. And I'm sure our book club members will pick up the rally for movie and TV.
Movie.
Yes.
Do it
yes.
all.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Christine and Catherine. Have a great rest of the evening.
This is so fun. Thank you. Send us the link so we can share it.
Yes, we will. We
All
definitely
right,
will.
y'all. Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Ooh. That was fabulous.
I should have bet you last night. I should have made a bet because
have.
I made it through the whole hour and I did not cry.
But does it count if you cry now?
Neither one of us, I'm still not crying.
I
Neither
know.
one of us thought that I was going to get through it without.
No, truly, I didn't. I'll be honest. With book
I
club
didn't
members,
either.
I was like, ain't no way.
I
She's
was-
getting through.
we were talking last night and I got a little emotional when it was just me and Brenda
Mhm.
talking, and I went, oh God, I can't be a mess, not in front of Christine and Catherine. It was just a perfect evening. Christine has been an idol of mine for years, so. And Catherine is just so just inspiring, and two wonderful, powerful women. It was just a wonderful night.
It really was. I had so many more questions. We had some other questions we didn't get to because
Yeah.
I think the process of their writing was so fascinating, and how they, interacted as writers and friends. And so that was a really neat thing about it. So I love this book. So
Yeah,
well, just
I
amazing.
thought it was great. Um, and I thought it was cool that they asked us, they turned it around and asked us what we thought at the end. That
I was
doesn't happen
surprised.
often.
I know, right? Well,
I loved it.
I don't want to end the night without mentioning what our upcoming events are.
Yes, we
So,
have some upcoming events.
if I could share for a moment, our February event is, and I'm also
Yay.
really looking forward to this, is Virginia
Me too.
Cantra's The Fairy Tale Life of Dorothy Gale. on February 19th at 7 Eastern.
Yep.
And would you like to announce our March pick while I bring up the graphic?
Before we get to March, I also want to add that we have our next happy hour with Ron Block on February 29th at 7:30 p.m. with a special guest. Our favorite thing
Unbeknownst to
to
Ron.
say, unbeknownst to
Yes, I almost
Ron.
forgot our leap day happy hour.
Yeah, leap day. We have an extra day this year to read. We should have that day off and just read.
I think we should start lobbying now for that to be a thing.
Yes, it should be a national. I mean, honestly, you only get one extra day every 4 years. It should be a national holiday, right? Like no one
Right.
should have to work on that day. We've got a couple
Absolutely.
of people still hanging out with us
Oh,
and
good.
making comments
So,
in the chat. Thank you guys for sticking with us
yes,
tonight.
thank you. We kind of got,
Molly said
I mean,
Molly said she hopes they write more together, even if it's not a sequel. I agree. Marilyn says it's great to see their dedication and intelligence. Irene said awesome discussion. Leah, wonderful hour. Edie, thanks for picking this book. Awesome. Susie, thank you, PB and J. Anissa
oh,
just said, wow. That's how I feel too. Wow.
I know. I feel kind of breathless, like after that hour, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was just so powerful.
Yeah, it really was. And I just want to point out, I shared that I related to DeAndrea in a lot of the ways because I've dealt with a lot of racism in my life, probably more than a lot of other people. And um, but I've I don't let that shelter me either. Like I don't want people to think that I let that win because you can't let the bad and the haters and the ugliness. And that's why you see me now. My friends are like United Colors of Benetton. Like my best friends are white, you included, you
Mhm.
know, everything. I have all friends, all types, all ages. And I think that's how the world should be. Everyone should love
Mhm.
each other. And unfortunately, not everyone subscribes to that philosophy. So we deal with things like this. And it's important to talk about them. And I think this book
Absolutely.
was the best way to get those conversations going. So,
Exactly. The framework that they built was a great space to
yeah,
explore all of that. So I really appreciated the ability to sit down and think, think
yeah.
about those things and think about how Rebecca felt and think about DeAndrea, how, all of what she went through and her husband and her
Mhm.
child. I mean, I want to know what happens to Nina.
That was one
And
thing I wish we could have discussed was Nina and Izzy. I loved their
oh, that's
relationship.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
wanted
I
to ask
loved
that
their
too. But I mean,
relationship.
I
Time
mean,
flew
it was just,
by.
yeah, time
Yeah.
did fly by.
And it just shows for their relationship shows it's the perfect example of how hate and racism is taught because they're young and they're kids and they love each other and they don't care. It doesn't matter. So it's kind of like when do you lose that innocence and loving everyone no matter what to get to the
Mhm.
Jacks? But I
Yeah,
love
right.
Nina and Izzy's relationship. I just thought they could have their own little children's series.
Oh, they could. We'll add that.
We'll add that to our list
We'll
of
tell
comments.
Catherine and Christine that we have another project for them.
I mean, Christine already writes brilliant children's book. The Frankie and Friends
Right.
series
This
is
is not
so
that
cute.
far.
She can just add another one on, easy peasy. Oh, sidebar. Okay, well, I think we were
Easy
supposed to.
peasy, Izzy. Easy peasy, Nina Izzy.
Easy peasy, Nina Izzy. We'll work on it. We'll get it.
Yeah, it does need some work, but there's something
Okay.
there.
There's something there. We're on to something, people. Oh Lord,
All
help
right, I'm
us.
gonna wrap
Okay.
this baby up.
Yeah. March, right?
Yes,
Is that yeah, our
yes.
March book club discussion. A love song for Ricky Wild by Tia Williams.
Yay.
Yay.
This
We have
whole year
great
is just,
February, March.
yeah, it's starting out just the whole year is a bang from January through March. So I'm excited about all these books. Can't wait to talk with the authors about them. Thanks, you guys, book club members, for hanging in with us. It's already
Yes.
8:15, but oh, great discussion. Please continue to share your thoughts on the book on the page. We love to hear them.
Yep. And if you have any takeaways, if you see something, say something, continue the conversation, continue spreading love, and happy reading. PB and J out.
Night.
Good night.